The spring of 1847 brought Sarah Mitchell to her knees beside the Platte River, her calloused fingers working through the soft Nebraska mud. 3 days without meat had left her family's stomachs tight with hunger. The familiar aroma of wild onion drifted up from the cluster of green shoots she'd discovered, a blessing among the willows where pioneers often foraged. She yanked the pale bulbs free, dirt crumbling between her fingers as she gathered an apronful. The leaves stood tall and grass-like, their bases sheathed in papery layers that peeled away like proper onions. Nearby, delicate white flowers nodded on slender stalks, 6 petals arranged in perfect stars, beautiful enough that she plucked one for her daughter's hair. Back at the wagon circle, iron pots clanged over crackling fires as women prepared the evening meal. Sarah's knife sliced through the bulbs with satisfying resistance, releasing that sharp scent into the smoky air. She tossed them into bubbling water with dried beans and salt pork, never noticing how the flower's petals lacked the telltale green stripe of true wild onion. The bulb tears between his teeth, releasing juice that should taste sharp and familiar. Instead, a metallic bitterness floods his mouth, coating his tongue with an acrid film that refuses to dissipate. The frontiersman, Jacob Hartley, pauses mid-chew beside his campfire, the flames casting shadows across his weathered face as confusion registers in his narrowing eyes. He forces himself to swallow, attributing the strange flavor to soil or perhaps the plant's proximity to mineral deposits. His stomach, empty for 2 days, save for pine needle tea and a handful of dried berries, clenches suddenly, a sharp twisting sensation that makes him shift uncomfortably on the fallen log serving as his seat. The prickling sensation spreads from his tongue down his throat, an unfamiliar burning that wild onions never produce. He reaches for his water flask, the leather warm from proximity to the fire, and drinks deeply. The liquid provides no relief. His calloused fingers absently rub his abdomen as the first tendrils of true unease begin their slow crawl up his spine. The metallic taste still clung to the frontiersman's teeth as he stumbled back to his bedroll, dismissing the strange flavor as frontier fare. Within the hour, his abdomen seized with a violence that doubled him forward, bile rising in his throat. The rough wool blanket beneath him grew damp with sweat as invisible molecules of zygacine infiltrated his bloodstream, binding to sodium channels in his nerve cells. Each convulsion tightened like iron bands around his gut, forcing guttural groans through clenched teeth. The toxins methodically disrupted electrical signals racing along his neural pathways, causing muscles to fire erratically. His hands trembled uncontrollably, fingers splaying and contracting as if pulled by phantom strings. The campfire's warmth couldn't penetrate the cold radiating from within his bones. Saliva pooled at the corners of his mouth, thick and foaming as his body fought the molecular invaders attacking his nervous system. The zygacine compounds, cyclopamine and gervine, locked onto receptors meant for essential neurotransmitters, hijacking cellular communication. His pupils dilated wide, despite the firelight, transforming familiar shadows into writhing shapes as his vision blurred and doubled. The frontiersman's convulsions had ceased by dawn, leaving only cold flesh wrapped in buffalo hide. September 11th, 1805, Captain Meriwether Lewis scratched the date into his journal as Private Silas Goodrich collapsed beside the Clearwater River, clutching his stomach. The same mysterious illness that struck their camp. York, Clark's servant, pointed to scattered white bulbs near the water's edge where Goodrich had foraged that morning. Lewis watched helplessly as Reuben Field vomited into the rushes, his rifle abandoned in the dirt. John Coulter staggered 3 steps before his legs buckled, 8 men down within 2 hours. The expedition's hunters had mistaken Death Camas for wild onions, an error Lewis himself might have made. The plants grew together in the same meadows, their green shoots indistinguishable until flowering season revealed the truth. Private Shannon retched blood onto his leather shirt. The dried bison strips they'd saved for emergencies lay untouched in their parfleche bags. Strong men reduced to writhing invalids couldn't swallow solid food. Lewis counted 31 expedition members still standing. The cause of discovery, conquerors of the Missouri River, halted by a plant no bigger than a child's fist. Their westward march froze at longitude 114 degrees. The groaning continued through the night as Captain Lewis abandoned his own bedroll. His fingers trembled against the leather spine of his botanical journal, pages filled with pressed specimens and meticulous notes from 3 years of wilderness travel. The campfire cast dancing shadows across sketches of prairie roses and yarrow until his thumb stopped at a drawing labelled Zygadenus venenosus. Lewis held a wilted specimen inches from the flame, rotating the stem between his thumb and forefinger. The seed pods, there. Not the smooth, papery husks of wild onion, but 6-chambered capsules, each segment slightly pointed at the tip. His jaw clenched. The same distinctive pods littered the meadow where his men had foraged just hours earlier, mistaking death for sustenance. The captain's pencil scratched across the margin. Bulbs identical to allium when dormant. Fatal error, examine seed structure. Behind him, Private Shannon convulsed again, bile darkening the dirt. Lewis possessed the knowledge now, could identify every lethal marker, yet no amount of botanical expertise could extract the zygacine already coursing through his men's blood. Understanding meant nothing against chemistry. Lewis's leather journal slammed shut as he barked orders through the September darkness. The expedition's medical supplies, precious vials of ipecac and calomel, lay scattered across makeshift pallets where 7 men writhed. Private Shannon forced a ladle of brine between Sergeant Floyd's clenched teeth, the salt crystals scraping raw throat tissue as the afflicted man's body rejected even this crude emetic. The clear water rushed below their camp, its cold mountain water now their only hope. Men crawled on hands and knees, dragging tin cups through the silty current, gulping desperately, as if volume alone could dilute the poison coursing through their veins. York held Private Gibson's head steady while another spasm seized his gut, the frontiersman's fingers clawing trenches in the riverbank mud. By dawn, the vomiting had ceased, not from recovery, but exhaustion. The zygacine had penetrated too deep. Corps members lay scattered like battlefield casualties, their breathing shallow, pupils unfocused. Lewis counted pulses with practiced fingers, finding them weak and irregular. The expedition's survival now depended on time, whether their bodies could outlast the toxins' relentless grip on their nervous systems. 40 years after Lewis watched his men writhe in agony, another chapter of the Death Camas tragedy unfolded along the dusty Oregon Trail. Mrs. Margaret O'Brien, her apron stained with trail dust, bent over a bubbling pot suspended above crackling sagebrush flames. The Snake River gurgled nearby as she stirred white bulbs into salt pork and dried beans. Bulbs she'd dug that morning from a meadow blooming with delicate 6-petaled flowers. Her husband Thomas lifted the first spoonful to his cracked lips, the other emigrants gathering close with tin plates outstretched. The broth scalded his tongue, but beneath the heat lurked something else, a metallic bitterness that made his throat constrict. Mrs. O'Brien watched his face contort, the spoon clattering against enamelware as violent nausea seized him. One by one, the diners clutched their stomachs, their evening meal transforming into a nightmare of retching and groaning. The campfire's orange glow illuminated faces twisted in agony, grown men reduced to whimpering as the zygacine toxins attacked their nervous systems. Mrs. O'Brien's trembling hands still clutched the ladle, her mind racing to comprehend how her careful foraging had poisoned 8 souls. The Death Camas had claimed more victims, its perfect mimicry of wild onion continuing to deceive even the most cautious pioneers navigating the treacherous path to Oregon's promised lands. The burning sensation in Mrs. O'Brien's throat spreads downward as the zygacine molecules slip through her stomach, lining into her bloodstream. Each toxin molecule, shaped like a twisted key, seeks out sodium channels in nerve cells, the microscopic gates that control every voluntary movement from blinking to breathing. The poison locks these gates open. Electrical signals that should pulse in controlled bursts now flood through neurons like water through a broken dam. Muscles receive 1,000 contradictory commands: contract, relax, contract again. The victim's hands tremble first, then their legs buckle as motor neurons misfire in cascading failure. Inside the nerve terminals, calcium ions accumulate where they shouldn't, triggering more chaotic signals. The toxin doesn't destroy, it hijacks. Every attempt to move becomes a battle against one's own nervous system. Pupils dilate, saliva pools. The body's most basic functions spiral beyond conscious control as zygacine rewrites the chemical language of life itself. The anatomical diagram dissolves into harsh reality as Mrs. O'Brien's husband convulses on the wagon floor, his diaphragm spasming against paralyzed intercostal muscles. Each breath becomes a battle, the chest cavity contracting erratically while zygacine floods the phrenic nerves controlling respiration. White foam bubbles between his clenched teeth, tinged pink from bitten tongue tissue. His pupils dilate until the irises disappear into black pools, the toxin disrupting acetylcholine receptors throughout the nervous system. Fingers claw at his throat, searching for the obstruction that exists only in failing neural pathways. The respiratory center in his medulla oblongata fires desperate signals that never reach their destination. Muscles refuse to obey, lungs refuse to expand. Mrs. O'Brien presses her palm against his chest, feeling the flutter of a heart racing at 180 beats per minute. His hand finds hers, trembling violently from muscle fasciculations, squeezing with what strength remains. The saliva frothing from his mouth carries the bitter taste of Death Camas, nature's cruelest deception made manifest in every labored, wheezing gasp. The Snake River prospector steadied his mare against the Wyoming wind 53 years after Mrs. O'Brien's fatal stew had claimed 3 lives along this same trail. His calloused fingers traced the green shoots sprouting beside a trickling stream, their onion-like stalks beckoning with the promise of fresh sustenance after weeks of hardtack and dried beans. From his saddlebag emerged a leather-bound guide, its pages yellowed and brittle from 1,000 consultations in the field. The illustrations showed 2 plants side by side, Death Camas with its 6 distinct petals and grass-like leaves emerging from a single point, wild onion with its hollow stems and unmistakable aroma when crushed between weathered fingertips. He knelt, breaking a single leaf, inhaling deeply for that pungent onion scent that would mean survival. Nothing, only the green smell of grass filled his nostrils. The prospector released the shoot, watching it fall back among its poisonous brothers, then mounted his horse and continued west, carrying forward the hard-won wisdom that had cost so many pioneers their lives.